"Look what we have here," Victoria Sterling sneered, her voice a weapon designed to wound, slicing through the rhythmic symphony of the the percussive slap of leather on leather, the steady hiss of jump ropes, the grunts of exertion. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger, the nail a slash of crimson, at the 18-year-old who had just walked through the heavy glass doors of the Sterling Elite Boxing Club. "Looks like someone got lost on the way to the neighborhood gym." The sound of punches hitting the heavy bags stopped, not all at once, but in a staggered, domino-like effect. The humid, sweat-scented air grew still. All eyes, a collective wave of curiosity and contempt, turned to Kesha Campbell. She stood just inside the entrance, a small, solitary figure holding a worn sports bag, its strap frayed, its color faded from a forgotten vibrancy. Her sneakers, though clean, were wholly, the rubber worn thin at the heels, a testament to miles, walked on unforgiving city pavement. Her dark, beautiful skin, the color of rich Jamaican earth, seemed to absorb and defy the immaculate, almost sterile whiteness of the exclusive environment. This was a temple of wealth and physical perfection, a place where the monthly fees cost more than 3 months of the national minimum wage. Victoria Sterling, the reigning women's world boxing champion for 2 consecutive brutal years, was known not only for her lethal, technically perfect fists, but for her even sharper, more venomous tongue. At 26 she had meticulously, and very profitably, built a career based not just on athletic prowess, but on a carefully cultivated brand of arrogance and social media taunts. Her controversial, often racist and classist statements generated millions of views, thousands of headlines, and a legion of devoted, and equally toxic, fans. Her latest Instagram post, which had already garnered 500,000 likes, was a perfect example of her brand. It was a photo of her, muscles gleaming under the studio lights, flexing a bicep with a simple, and deeply insidious, caption: "When you're naturally superior, you don't have to pretend to be equal." "Sorry," Kesha muttered, her voice a low, quiet murmur, almost swallowed by the vast high-ceilinged space. She looked down at the cracked screen of her cheap second-hand cell phone, checking the address she had so carefully, so hopefully typed into the map application. "I thought this was the youth scholarship program." Victoria's laughter was not a sound of mirth. It was a high, piercing, and deeply annoying siren of a sound designed to signal to everyone in the room that the entertainment had arrived. "Scholarship program," she shrieked, her voice dripping with a mock, incredulous disbelief. "Honey, this isn't a social project. This is a place of business. We train real, elite athletes here, not social experiments." Kesha Campbell had arrived in the United States, in the cold, gray, and unforgiving maw of New York City, just 6 short, and very long, months ago. She had brought with her nothing but the clothes on her back, the worn sports bag in her hand, and the heavy, crushing weight of the hopes and dreams of an entire Jamaican family. A family who had saved every single, precious penny they had ever earned, had sold their small plot of land, had taken on debts they might never repay just to give her this one, single, improbable chance at a better life. She worked 16 hours a day, not an exaggeration, a literal bone-crushing, soul-wearing reality. From 5 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon, she worked as a cleaner in a downtown office building, the acrid smell of disinfectant a constant companion. From 2 in the afternoon until 10 at night, she worked as a dishwasher in a hot, greasy, and perpetually chaotic restaurant kitchen. And in between, she slept, for a few, precious, dreamless hours, in a small, cramped room she shared with 3 other immigrant women in a run-down tenement building in the Bronx. The scholarship program at the Sterling Elite Boxing Club was her only chance, her only hope, her only fragile, and now rapidly diminishing, flicker of light in a dark, and very lonely, tunnel. "The program exists," a firm, gravelly voice cut through Victoria's shrill laughter. Tom Rodriguez, a veteran trainer with a face like a road map of old battles and a quiet, no-nonsense authority, emerged from his small, cluttered office, a folder in his hand. He was the owner of the gym, a man who had, in his youth, been a celebrated fighter himself, before transitioning to a long and distinguished career as a trainer of champions. "And Kesha Campbell," he added, his eyes, which were kind but held no illusions, settling on Kesha, "is on the approved list." Victoria rolled her eyes, a dramatic, theatrical gesture for the benefit of her audience. "Really, Tom?" she sighed, her voice a long, drawn-out expression of profound, and deeply theatrical, boredom. "Are you really going to turn my training facility, my brand, into an NGO? My sponsors, The people who actually pay for all of this, she gestured vaguely at the expensive state-of-the-art equipment, are not going to like that at all. Your sponsors pay for results, Victoria, Tom replied, his voice dry, his expression unreadable. They don't pay for your opinion about who trains here. But Victoria was not finished. She was, in fact, just getting started. She approached Kesha, her movements a slow, predatory swagger, a cruel and deeply unpleasant smile played on her lips. It was a smile that looked more like a threat. You know what, she said, her voice now a low, conspiratorial purr. Since you want to train with the big girls so badly, how about we find out, right here, right now, whether you really deserve to be here? The gym, which had begun to return to its normal rhythmic hum, fell silent again. Every single person in that room, from the youngest amateur to the most seasoned professional, knew what was coming next. A friendly spar, Victoria continued, savoring every single delicious and deeply cruel word. You, against me. 3 rounds. If you can last, she paused. A dramatic and very effective pause. You can stay. If not, she made a sharp, dismissive gesture with her hand, a gesture of a queen banishing a peasant from her court. Kesha felt the heavy, crushing weight of everyone's gaze on her. She knew this was a trap, a carefully constructed and very public humiliation designed to break her spirit, to crush her dreams, before she had even had a chance to begin. But as she looked at Victoria, at the arrogant, cruel confidence in the champion's eyes, something deep inside her, a small, hard, and very old flame, remained unshaken. I accept, Kesha said, her voice a quiet and utterly unexpected note of calm in the tense, charged silence. Victoria frowned, a flicker of surprise, of annoyance, crossing her perfectly made-up face. She had been expecting tears, she had been expecting a plea, she had been expecting a satisfying, and very public, capitulation. Are you sure? She asked, her voice now laced with a new, and more genuine note of menace. Because when I'm done with you, you'll question whether it was ever worth it to dream so big. I'm sure, Kesha repeated. And for the very first time since she had arrived in this cold and hostile new country, she smiled. What Victoria Sterling, the 2-time undefeated world champion, didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have imagined in her wildest, most arrogant dreams, was that she was about to find out why, in the dark and desperate slums of Kingston, Jamaica, a place she could not even begin to imagine, Kesha Campbell was known by a very specific and very feared nickname. Lightning. Like all lightning, she only showed her true and devastating power when the storm hit, while Victoria was already planning how to turn the impending and deeply satisfying humiliation into a new and very viral piece of content for her social media empire. Tom Rodriguez, the old and very wise trainer, was watching the quiet and very determined gleam in Kesha Campbell's eyes, and he felt a familiar and very professional chill run down his spine. It was the same chill he always felt when he recognized a truly and deeply special talent, a talent that was disguised, as it so often was, as an apparent and very deceptive vulnerability. News of the friendly fight spread through the gym, and then, through the tight-knit and often gossipy world of New York City boxing. Like wildfire, in less than an hour, the usual, sparse, late-afternoon crowd had swelled. Other boxers, trainers from rival gyms, and even some local sports journalists, their phones held aloft like weapons, were on their way. Victoria Sterling, the arrogant, and often cruel, world champion, versus an unknown, and apparently very foolish, Jamaican girl. It promised to be the kind of brutal, and deeply satisfying, entertainment that the modern, and often very bloodthirsty, world of social media loved to consume. 3 rounds, 16-ounce gloves. Headgear is mandatory, Tom Rodriguez established, his voice a low and very firm rumble, a desperate and largely futile attempt to downplay the impending and very public massacre. And this is just a spar, no bets, no live broadcast, just a simple and very professional training exercise. Victoria laughed, a loud, dismissive sound. Tom, relaxed, she said, as she was already in direct violation of his orders, recording a new series of stories for her 2 million Instagram followers. It'll be quick. She probably won't even make it to the second round. She turned her phone to face her face a mask of a practiced and very marketable arrogance. Guys, she narrated, her voice a breathless, excited whisper, you will not believe what is happening here. Some random charity case girl wants to challenge me to a fight, so I'm going to teach her a little lesson. A lesson in humility that she will never, ever forget. The comments, as she had known they would, started pouring in, a torrent of digital, and very enthusiastic, support. Destroy her, Victoria. These people need to be taught their place. Show her why you are the queen. While Victoria was basking in the warm, and very affirming, glow of her online attention, Kesha was silently making her way to the women's locker room. Her hands weren't shaking, they never did, before a fight, but her heart, her strong, and very resilient heart, was racing with a mixture of a cold, controlled anger, and a series of painful, and very vivid, memories that she had tried, for so long, to keep buried. Tom, the trainer, followed her. Kesha, he said, his voice a low, and very gentle murmur, as he closed the locker room door behind them. You don't have to do this. I know the scholarship program is important to you, but it's not worth getting seriously hurt, just to satisfy her monstrous arrogance. I won't get hurt, Kesha replied, her voice a calm, and very certain, whisper. She was testing the weight of the borrowed 16-ounce gloves, her movements fluid, practiced, and deeply, and unnervingly, familiar. Kesha, she's been the world champion for 2 years, Tom insisted, his own voice now full of a new, and very genuine, concern. She has a flawless professional technique. She has a genuine and very dangerous knockout power. She has the experience of 100 professional fights. And Kesha interrupted, as she looked up, her dark, and now very intense eyes meeting the veteran trainers in the mirror, have something that she will never, ever, have. Tom frowned, a deep, puzzled crease forming between his bushy, gray eyebrows. What would that be? Hunger. The single word echoed in the small and very modest locker room. Tom Rodriguez had trained hundreds, if not thousands, of athletes over the course of his long and very distinguished 30-year career. He had trained champions, he had trained journeymen, he had trained hopefuls, but he had rarely, if ever, heard that one single and very powerful word spoken with such a quiet and such a profound conviction. There was something in Kesha Campbell's eyes, a fierce and very real intensity that he had recognized only a handful of times before. He had recognized it in the true and very rare predators of the ring. Tell me something, Tom said, as he sat down on the bench next to her. His own, and very experienced, curiosity now thoroughly and completely piqued. Why did you take the bait? Why didn't you just ignore her taunts? Kesha closed her eyes for a long, silent moment, and the memories, the ones she had tried so hard to keep locked away, came flooding back, a dark and very powerful tide. The hot, dusty, and unforgiving streets of Kingston, her mother's desperate, and often terrified, screams, begging her, pleading with her, to stop fighting, the sharp, and very satisfying feel of her small, and very fast, fists connecting, with a surgical, and very practiced, precision, with the faces of boys, and men, who were much bigger, and much stronger, than she was. The nickname, Lightning, whispered with a mixture of fear, and of respect, in the dark, and very dangerous slums where she had grown up. Because I have lived this story before, she finally said, her voice a low and very quiet whisper. Many, many times, people like Victoria, they think they can break you with their words, with their contempt, with their absolute, and very comfortable, certainty that you are inferior. But they forget one very, very important thing. What would that be? Tom asked, his own voice now a whisper. Those of us who have grown up fighting for our survival, she said, as she opened her eyes, and her gaze, which was now as hard and as cold as steel, met his in the mirror. We don't fight for a sport. We don't fight for a trophy. We don't fight for the entertainment of a crowd. We fight to exist. Tom felt a genuine and very professional chill run down his spine. There was something prophetic in those words, something ancient, something true. It was as if Kesha were revealing not only her own and very personal motivation, but also, in a strange and very chilling way, prophesying Victoria Sterling's fate. Outside, in the main gym, Victoria was continuing her relentless and very public performance for the growing number of cell phone cameras. Look at what that girl is wearing, she sneered, as she pointed to Kesha's worn and very holy sneakers, which had been left neatly by the side of the ring. I bet she's never even stepped in a real, professional ring before. She probably learned how to box by watching YouTube videos. Laughter, loud and sycophantic, echoed through the now crowded gym. But some of the more experienced boxers, the ones who had been around, the ones who had seen it all, remained silent. There was something about Kesha's quiet and very unnerving posture, the way she had so calmly and so quickly accepted the impossible challenge, that had aroused a deep and very instinctive caution in them. Marcus the Mauler Williams, a former and very respected middleweight champion who now trained at the gym in his retirement, whispered to his own sparring partner, "Man, I don't know about this. I've seen that kind of calm before, and it's never, ever, a good sign. Sometimes the quiet ones, they're the most dangerous." Victoria, however, was too far gone in her own and very intoxicating arrogance to notice any of the subtle and very dangerous warning signs. "You know what the problem is with people from these third world countries," she continued, her voice now a loud and very public lecture for the benefit of her cameras. "They confuse their desperation with a real skill. They think that just because their life is hard, that they automatically know how to fight." Kesha emerged from the locker room at that very moment. She was wearing a pair of simple, black, and very borrowed boxing shorts and a plain, grey tank top. A tank top that revealed a pair of surprisingly and very impressively defined arms, the arms of someone who had, in fact, trained very, very seriously. Her movements were fluid, economical, and utterly and completely devoid of any wasted motion. She moved like a cat, a very sleek and a very dangerous cat, preparing to attack. "Ready to learn your lesson?" Victoria asked, her voice a sarcastic and very self-satisfied sneer. "Always," Kesha replied, her own voice a quiet and very deadly whisper. What Victoria Sterling, the two-time undefeated world champion, didn't know what she could never, in her wildest and most arrogant dreams, have imagined, was that Lightning Campbell had started fighting at the age of 8, on the hot, dusty, and unforgiving streets of Kingston, not for a sport, not for a hobby, not for fun, but because it was either that, or starve. By the time she was 12, she was regularly and very easily beating boys who were 3 years older and 30 pounds heavier than she was, in a series of clandestine and very illegal underground fights that earned just enough money to keep her small and very desperate family alive for another week. By the time she was 16, she had become a local and very feared legend, not for her brutality, but for her uncanny and almost supernatural ability to anticipate her opponent's moves and to counterattack with a blinding and very devastating speed, hence the nickname. A nickname she carried like a scar and like a badge of honor when she had finally and miraculously gotten her visa to come to the United States. She had sworn a sacred and very solemn vow to herself. She had sworn that she would never, ever set foot in a ring again. But some promises, she now knew, are made to be broken, especially when a person's dignity, their very right to exist, is at stake. Tom, the trainer, adjusted the fit of Kesha's gloves, his experienced and very sensitive hands noticing something that surprised him. Her hands, which should have been tense and nervous, were perfectly and completely relaxed, but the muscles in her forearms and in her shoulders had the dense and very powerful feel of someone who had, in fact, trained very hard and for a very, very long time. "Kesha," he asked, his own voice now a low and very curious whisper, "can I ask you something?" "Sure," she replied, her own eyes now fixed on Victoria, who was preening and posing for the cameras on the other side of the ring. "Have you really never fought before?" Kesha smiled. For the very first time since she had arrived at the gym, it was a small and almost imperceptible smile. But it was a smile that carried a universe of secrets. Secrets that were capable of rewriting the entire and very predictable situation. "Define," she replied, her own voice a quiet and very deadly whisper, "fought." And in that moment, while Victoria Sterling was continuing her arrogant and very public performance for her adoring and very bloodthirsty social media followers, while all of the spectators in that gym were mentally and very smugly betting on how long the poor and very outmatched amateur would last, something extraordinary and something impossible was about to happen, because sometimes, when we underestimate a person based on our own and very limited and very prejudiced preconceptions, we discover, to our great and often very painful cost, that the real predators, the truly dangerous ones, are exactly those who have learned, through a long and very hard and very painful experience, how to perfectly and completely camouflage their strength, until the exact and most devastating moment to reveal it. While Victoria Sterling continued her relentless and deeply satisfying campaign of public humiliation on her social media platforms, she had by now posted a full 17 different and increasingly cruel Instagram stories, all of them mocking the Jamaican amateur. Something completely different, something quiet and strategic, was happening behind the scenes at the gym. Tom Rodriguez, his professional instincts now fully and completely aroused, had decided to do a little and very discreet investigating of his own. 30 long and often brutal years of training boxers, of living and breathing the strange and often unforgiving world of the fight game, had taught him one very important and very immutable lesson: true and lasting strength rarely, if ever, shouts. And there was something about this quiet and very self-possessed young woman that defied all logic, all reason. Her hands did not have the soft, uncalloused look of a beginner. Her reflexes, which he had observed as she had moved around the gym, were too fast, too sharp, too precise. And above all, her calmness, her profound and deeply unnerving calmness, in the face of such a public and so very vicious attack, was unnatural. It was the calmness of a seasoned and very dangerous veteran. Kasha, Tom had called out to her as she was finishing her quiet, solitary warm-up in a corner of the gym, away from the prying and very intrusive eyes of the cell phone cameras. "Can I see you do some basic moves on the heavy bag just to gauge your level?" What had happened over the next 5 and very revealing minutes had made Tom Rodriguez, a man who thought he had seen everything there was to see in the world of boxing, question everything he thought he knew about the nature of natural and very raw talent. Kesha had moved around the heavy 150-pound bag with a fluid and almost weightless grace that seemed to defy the very laws of gravity. Her punches, which she had thrown in a series of lightning-fast and technically perfect combinations, had landed with a sharp and very authoritative thwack, a sound that had spoken of a deep and very practiced power, a power that had come not just from her muscles but from her hips, from her core, from the very ground beneath her feet. And her footwork was a thing of pure and very breathtaking beauty. It was a silent and very deadly dance, a dance that he had only ever seen in a handful of the greatest, most naturally gifted fighters he had ever had the privilege of training. "My God," Tom had muttered to himself, his own voice a low and very disbelieving whisper. "Who is this girl, really?" At that very moment, the heavy glass door of the gym had opened, and a man had walked in, a man whose presence had made Kesha, in the middle of her beautiful and very deadly dance, freeze completely. It was Winston Campbell, a man of about 50, with the scarred and very powerful hands of a man who had worked hard and had fought hard his entire life. He had the quiet, watchful eyes of a man who had seen too much of the world's ugliness, but who had, somehow, managed to hold on to his own and very private sense of honor. He was her uncle, her mother's brother, and he had, as she now saw with a sinking and very guilty heart, flown in from Miami as soon as he had heard, through the rapid and very efficient grapevine of their extended family, about the fight. "Lightning," Winston had said, his voice a simple and very powerful statement of fact. The nickname, spoken aloud in that sterile and very foreign gym, had echoed like a gunshot. Some of the older boxers, the ones who had been around the international fight scene for a while, had frowned, as if they were trying to remember where and when they had heard that strange and very evocative name before. "Uncle Winston," Kesha had asked, her own voice, for the very first time that day, betraying a hint of a real and very genuine nervousness. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see if my niece has completely and utterly lost her mind," he had replied, his English thick with the beautiful and very musical accent of his native Jamaica. "I thought we had an agreement, girl. I thought those days were behind us." Tom, his own curiosity now a burning and very professional fire in his gut, had approached them. "Do you two know each other?" he had asked, the question a masterpiece of understatement. Winston had looked at Tom, his wise and very weary eyes appraising the old trainer as if he were deciding how much of the truth of their long and very complicated story to reveal. "I have known this girl," he had said finally, his voice a low and very serious rumble, "since she was 8 years old. And I can assure you, my friend, that that woman over there," he had gestured with his chin towards Victoria, who was now preening and posing for a new series of selfies, "has no idea no idea at all what she is about to face. While this quiet and very intense conversation was taking place in a corner of the ring, Victoria was on the other side of the gym, recording a new and very confident piece of content for her TikTok account. "Guys, look at this," she had whispered, her voice a conspiratorial and very mock-sympathetic purr, as she had zoomed in on Kesha and her newly arrived uncle. She even brought her family to watch her get humiliated. How cute, right? They'll have a lot of consoling to do later. The comments on her latest post had, as she had known they would, exploded. Victoria is going to destroy that girl. Teach her not to mess with Americans. Show her what real, professional boxing is. Winston had watched Victoria for a few long and very silent seconds. And then he had shaken his head, a look of profound and very deep disgust on his face. "Arrogant," he had muttered. "Just the type that Lightning used to. Whoa. Let's just say that she taught a lot of very arrogant men a very hard and a very permanent lesson in humility on the streets of Kingston." "Uncle, please," Kesha had begged, her own voice now a low and very desperate whisper. "Don't tell anyone. I don't want anyone to know." "Know what?" Tom had asked, his own voice now a low and very curious whisper, his instincts as a trainer, as a connoisseur of fighters, now screaming at him that he was on the verge of a major and very significant discovery. Winston had sighed, a deep and very heavy sound, the sound of a man who was carrying a weight of memories that were too heavy for any one person to bear. "Tom, can I call you Tom?" he had asked. "You seem like a decent man, so I am going to tell you something that might just change your entire perspective on this fight." He had pointed to Kesha, who was now alone in the corner of the ring, her movements a blur of a controlled and a very deadly grace. "That girl over there," he had said, his own voice now a low and very serious rumble, "was considered to be the best and the most dangerous street fighter that Kingston, Jamaica has ever produced." "Street fighter," Tom had repeated, the two words a strange and very incongruous description for the quiet and seemingly gentle young woman before him. At 12 years old, Winston had continued, his own eyes now distant, remembering, she was defeating grown men 3 times her size. By the time she was 15, she had a reputation, a legend, that made even the most hardened and the most violent gangsters in the city respect her and fear her. Lightning Campbell wasn't just a nickname, my friend. It was a warning. He had paused, a look of profound and very deep sadness now in his eyes. "She stopped fighting completely when she got her visa to come to this country. She swore to me, she swore to her mother, that she would never, ever set foot in a ring again." Tom had looked at Kesha, who was now standing perfectly still in the corner of the ring, her eyes closed, her breathing slow and deep and very controlled, with new and very wide eyes. "Then why?" he had asked, his own voice now a whisper of pure, unadulterated, and very professional awe. "Why did she agree to fight Victoria?" "Because," Winston had replied, his own voice now a low and very dangerous growl. "Some people, some very stupid people, they confuse kindness with weakness, and Lightning has never, ever tolerated being underestimated, because of her color, because of her gender, or because of her background." Across the gym, Victoria had finished another series of smug and very self-satisfied posts, mocking Kesha, and she was now talking very loudly to her manager on her phone. "Michael, this is going to be a viral sensation," she was saying, her own voice full of a triumphant and very premature glee. "A world champion versus a complete and very pathetic amateur. It's the kind of content that the sponsors love, total and very public domination. Just make sure you don't hurt her too badly." Victoria, her manager's tinny and very distant voice had replied over the speakerphone, "We don't want any lawsuits for bodily injury." Victoria had laughed, a loud and very dismissive sound. "Michael, relax. It will be so quick, so clean, that she won't even have time to get hurt. Seriously." Winston had overheard this conversation, and his own and very dark eyes had narrowed. "Tom," he had said, his own voice now a low and very confidential whisper, "can I give you a piece of advice?" "Of course," Tom had replied, his own and very professional curiosity now at a fever pitch. "Bet on Lightning." "Why?" "Because Victoria Sterling," Winston had said, his own voice now a quiet and very deadly whisper, "may be a world champion, but she has never, not once in her entire privileged and very comfortable life, had to fight for her survival. She has never had to face someone who has learned, from a very, very young age, that losing a fight means not eating. Lightning isn't here to look pretty, my friend. She is here to prove a point. At that very moment, Kesha had approached them, her own face now glistening with a light sheen of sweat after her intense, and very private, work at Uncle Winston. She had asked, her own voice now full of a new, and very hard edge. What, are you telling Tom the truth, kid? Winston had replied, his own voice now full of a new, and very fierce, pride. That you are not the helpless, and very pathetic, victim that this arrogant American thinks you are. Kesha had looked around the gym, and she had noticed that some of the other, more experienced, boxers were now watching her, not with their earlier, and very casual, contempt, but with a new, and very real, curiosity, and respect. Uncle, I really don't want to, she had started to say, her own voice now full of a new, and very real, conflict. Don't want to what? Winston had interrupted, his own voice now a low, and very powerful, rumble. Show them who you really are. Lightning, you have spent the last 6 months of your life cleaning other people's toilets, because you wanted to start a new life, a quiet life. I respect that. But when someone, anyone, tries to humiliate you, tries to diminish you, because of your color, because of your background, because of your past, then no new life, no quiet life, can erase what is in your blood. Tom had felt a genuine, and very professional, chill. Kesha, he had asked, his own voice now a quiet, and very respectful, whisper, can I ask you something? Why did you really, truly, accept this fight? Kesha had been silent for a long and very thoughtful moment, her own, and very dark, eyes still fixed on Victoria, who was continuing to record her arrogant, and very self-satisfied content. On the other side of the gym, when she had finally spoken, her own voice had a new, and very harsh, quality that Tom had never heard from her before. Because people like Victoria Sterling, she had said, her own voice now a low, and very dangerous growl, think they can diminish us, they think they can humiliate us, they think they can put us in our place, based on nothing more than the color of our skin, or the country that we came from. She had looked at Tom then, her own eyes now blazing with a new, and very fierce, fire. She looked at me, and she saw an easy victim. She saw a good story for her social media. She saw a joke, to entertain her followers. She had paused, and a small, and very predatory smile had touched her lips. What she doesn't know, she had added, her own voice now a quiet, and very deadly whisper, is that where I grew up, respect isn't given, it's earned. And when someone tries to take away our dignity, she had smiled again, a wider, and even more predatory, smile. Well, sometimes, lightning has to remind people why storms are feared. And in that moment, as Victoria Sterling had continued her arrogant, and very public, performance for her adoring, and very bloodthirsty cameras, completely, and blissfully, oblivious to the quiet, and very deadly, conversation that was changing everything, just a few feet away. Everyone in that gym, from the youngest, most naive amateur to the most seasoned, and very cynical, professional, had realized that they were about to witness something far, far beyond a simple, and very one-sided, friendly fight. They had realized that they were about to witness a reckoning in which years of a quiet, and very painful, humiliation would finally, and very powerfully, find their voice, through the fists of a young woman who had learned, on the hardest, and most unforgiving streets in the world, that sometimes the only language that certain people, certain very arrogant people, can understand, is the language of force, applied, with a surgical, and a very devastating, precision. Asterisk, the bell, a sharp, jarring, and deeply incongruous sound, in the now silent, and almost reverent, atmosphere of the gym, rang, and the two fighters, the champion and the janitor's daughter, met in the center of the ring. Victoria, true to her aggressive, and very public, persona, went on the attack immediately. She launched a flurry of quick, sharp, and technically perfect jabs, punches that were designed to intimidate, to overwhelm, to establish her dominance from the very first second. The punches sliced through the thick, humid air right where Kesha's head had been, just a millisecond earlier. What the hell? Victoria muttered, her voice a low and very confused growl, as she frowned, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows knitting together in a look of pure, unadulterated disbelief. Her punches, the punches that had won her 2 world championships, had connected with nothing but empty, and very frustrating air. Kesha moved like smoke. She moved like water. She moved like a ghost. She was always, somehow, one step ahead, one fraction of a second faster, always just out of reach. Her feet, which were encased in a pair of old and very worn, borrowed boxing shoes, slid and danced across the canvas with a fluid and almost weightless grace that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. It was as if she could predict every single move that Victoria was about to make, a full second before Victoria herself had even thought of it. "Stay still, you little bitch," Victoria shouted, her voice now a raw and very undignified sound of pure and very public frustration. She increased the force and the ferocity of her punches, her movements now becoming a little more wild, a little more reckless, a little more desperate, and then, it happened at the exact moment that Victoria, in her frustration, lost her balance after throwing a wild and very poorly calculated cross. Kasha counterdash attacked. It was not a powerful blow. It was not a haymaker. It was a small, sharp, and perfectly and surgically timed left hook. It connected with the side of Victoria's face with a sharp and very satisfying thwack, a sound that echoed throughout the now completely silent gym like a gunshot. Victoria staggered backward, her own, and very surprised, hand flying up to touch her cheek, her eyes wide with a new and very real disbelief. She had never, not once in her entire and very dominant professional career, been hit with such a clean, such a precise, and such an utterly and completely unexpected punch, especially not by a smaller and supposedly much weaker opponent. "Impossible," she whispered, her own voice now a thin and very reedy sound. But Kesha was already moving again, her own feet a silent and very deadly blur on the canvas. What followed was not a fight. It was a demonstration of a level of martial artistry that was so pure, so profound, so utterly and completely breathtaking, that it reduced the entire, and now completely and utterly captivated, gym to an absolute and very reverent silence. Kesha wasn't just fighting, she was conducting a symphony of a controlled and a very beautiful violence. Every single punch was calculated, every single movement had a purpose, every single dodge, every single slip, every single parry seemed to be choreographed, to be part of a larger and very beautiful and very deadly dance. Victoria, now desperate, tried to use her superior weight, her superior reach, her superior raw physical strength to her advantage, but it was like trying to catch lightning in her hands. It was like trying to punch the wind. For every single and very clumsy blow that she managed to land, a glancing and largely ineffective blow, she received 3 sharp and very precise counterpunches in return. For every single and very desperate advance that she made, Kesha had already anticipated it, had already countered it, had already moved out of the way. "Who is this girl?" Someone in the audience, a seasoned and very cynical sports journalist, shouted, his own voice now full of a new and very genuine awe. Winston, who was watching from the side of the ring, a small and very proud smile on his face, answered him. "Lightning Campbell," he murmured, his own voice a quiet and very satisfied rumbled at the moment of truth, the moment that would be replayed on sports channels and on social media for years to come, came in the second round. Victoria, her face now swollen and marked, her confidence, her arrogance, her entire sense of self, now completely and utterly shattered, realized, with a sickening and very final clarity, that she had made the biggest and most catastrophic mistake of her entire and very celebrated career. Her arrogant and very cruel social media posts were continuing to be shared, to be liked, to be commented on, but now the comments had completely and irrevocably changed in tone. "Victoria is getting completely and utterly destroyed by an amateur. Where is the world champion? I don't see her. That Jamaican girl is a fucking legend. She is destroying her." Jerry, her manager, was shouting frantic and now completely useless instructions from her corner, but Victoria could barely hear him over the roar of the crowd, a crowd that was now openly and very enthusiastically rooting against her. And that was when Kesha decided to show her and the entire world her true colors. "Lightning was never just a nickname," she said calmly, her voice a quiet and very deadly whisper, as she approached Victoria, who was now backing away, her own eyes wide with a new and very real terror against the ropes. It was a warning. The combination that followed was so fast, so fluid, so utterly and completely breathtaking, that the high-speeded, very expensive cell phone cameras could barely capture it. A jab, a cross, a hook, and an uppercut, for punches thrown in less than 2 seconds, all of them connecting with a surgical and a very devastating precision. Victoria collapsed onto the canvas, not like a fighter, but like a demolished building. The gym exploded. People screamed. They cheered. They held their phones aloft, their own faces now a mask of pure, unadulterated, and very vicarious joy. They were filming everything, for social media, for posterity, for the sheer and very beautiful pleasure of it all. Victoria tried to get up, but her legs, the legs of a world champion, would not respond. For the very first time in her entire and very dominant life, the undefeated and very arrogant world champion had been knocked out by someone she had so casually, so cruelly, so publicly called a social project. 10. Tom shouted, his own voice now a mixture of a professional and very official authority, and a deep and very personal awe as he officiated the fight. The winner, by knockout, Kasha calmly and very gracefully walked over to the corner where Victoria was now being attended to by her panicked and now very useless cornermen. You said you wanted to teach me a lesson, she said softly, her own voice now devoid of any anger, of any triumph. I hope you learned that respect isn't earned by the color of your skin, by your nationality, or by the size of your bank account. It's earned by your character. Victoria looked up at Kesha, her own eyes now filled with the hot and very shameful tears of her own and very public humiliation. And for the very first time, she looked at her with something that could, just possibly, have been respect. Jerry. Her manager rushed over to check Victoria's phone, his own face now a mask of pure and very professional panic. Her cruel and very arrogant stories mocking Kesha had, indeed, gone viral. But now they were going viral for completely and irrevocably different reasons. Thousands and thousands of comments were now pouring in, all of them ridiculing her arrogance, her prejudice, her spectacular and very public fall from grace. Victoria Sterling just got destroyed by the very person she called an amateur. That's what happens when your prejudice meets a cold, hard, and very beautiful reality. Lightning Campbell just ended Victoria's career in 3 very short and very satisfying rounds. Oh my God, Victoria, Jerry said, as he showed her the phone, his own voice now a whisper of pure, unadulterated, and very professional horror. You have to see this. Your account, you have lost over 100,000 followers in the last hour, and your sponsors, they are cancelling their contracts, all of them. Victoria took her phone with trembling hands. Her last, and very arrogant, post, the one mocking Kesha had, in fact, become a digital memorial to her own, and very public, humiliation. The comments were merciless. Who laughed last, laughed best. The Jamaican just taught that racist a very hard and a very beautiful lesson. Lightning Campbell remembered the name. Arrogant Victoria. Forget the name. Tom approached Kesha, who was now being celebrated, being lifted onto the shoulders of the other, and now very respectful, boxers in the gym. Lightning, he said, his own voice now a mixture of a professional and a very personal. Oh, can I ask you something? Sure, she replied, her own face now a mask of a quiet and very humble exhaustion. Why didn't you tell them? He asked. Why didn't you tell them who you really were? From the very beginning. Kesha looked over at Victoria, who was still being helped to her feet, a broken and very defeated woman, both physically and emotionally. Because sometimes, she said, her own voice now a quiet and very wise whisper, people need to dig their own grave before they can truly understand the size of the hole they have gotten themselves into. Winston hugged his niece, his own face now a mask of a pure and very profound pride. You're still Lightning, he said, his own voice a low and very emotional rumble. No, Uncle, Kesha replied, as she watched Victoria being led, a shamefaced and very broken woman, out of the gym, under a barrage of sarcastic and very satisfying comments from the other boxers. Lightning was who I needed to be to survive. Today, I showed them who I really am, someone who does not and will not accept disrespect, but who fights for dignity, not for cruelty. As the cameras continued to roll, as the videos of the spectacular and very satisfying knockout went viral on social media, one final and very important question hung in the now transformed and now sacred air of the gym. Could a single and very public fight rewrite not only the careers of two very different women, but also the way an entire, and often very prejudiced, community views the nature of privilege, of power, and of the true, and very beautiful, measure of human strength. 3 months later, the contrast between the lives of the two women could not have been more brutal, or more complete. Victoria Sterling, who had once been the undefeated, and very arrogant, world champion, was now sitting in a small, and very modest apartment she had rented after losing her lavish, and very ostentatious, Miami mansion. Her sponsors, every single one of them, had cancelled all of their multi-million-dollar contracts in the immediate and very public aftermath of the viral video, a video that had, by now, been viewed over 50 million times. In every corner of the globe, Victoria Sterling getting destroyed by the woman she called an amateur had become the most shared and most celebrated meme of the year, turning her arrogance, her prejudice, her spectacular and very public fall from grace into a global and very satisfying joke. Nike, Adidas, Gatorade, all of the massive and very powerful brands that had once paid her millions and millions of dollars for her image, for her brand, now refused to even return her calls. Jerry, her former and very loyal manager, had been clear and very brutal in their last and very final conversation. Victoria, he had said, his own voice a mixture of a professional and a very personal frustration. You don't understand. It's not just about the fight that you lost. It's about who you showed yourself to be. No one at all, wants to associate their brand with that kind of ugly and very public prejudice and arrogance. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, Kesha Campbell was signing her first and very lucrative professional boxing contract with the prestigious and very powerful Golden Gloves Promotions. The value of the contract, a staggering $2 million for just her first 3 professional fights, with a renewal clause that could, and very likely would, reach $50 million if she continued to perform at the same, and very spectacular, level. Lightning Campbell had become not just a sporting phenomenon, she had become a symbol of resilience, of authenticity, of a quiet and very powerful dignity. Brands, the very same brands that had so quickly and so ruthlessly abandoned Victoria, now lined up, their own multi-million-dollar contracts in hand, to sponsor her. Under Armour had launched an entire, and very successful, new line of athletic wear, a line that had been inspired by her own, and very powerful, story. The tagline for the campaign was simple, and it was perfect: earned, not given. Tom Rodriguez was in his small, and very cluttered, gym office when he had received an unexpected, and very welcome, phone call. "Hello, Tom," the voice on the other end of the line had said. "This is ESPN. We want to make a documentary about how you discovered Lightning Campbell." "I didn't discover anything," Tom had replied, his own voice a mixture of a gruff and a very honest humility. She always knew who she was. She just needed someone to respect her before they saw her fists in action. The transformation of the gym itself had also been dramatic, and it had been profound. The scholarship program, which had once been a small and very modest and largely overlooked initiative, now received hundreds, if not thousands, of donations from all across the country. Young people from disadvantaged and often overlooked communities arrived daily, their own eyes now shining with a new and very real hope, all of them inspired by Kesha's incredible and very public story. The waiting list for the program now had more than 500 names on it. Winston Campbell visited his niece regularly, his own and very wise eyes always shining with the same and very quiet pride. "Remember what I said to you about hunger?" he had asked her during one of his visits. "You have proven to the entire world that it is not about where we come from. It is about the fire that we carry inside." Victoria, for her part, had tried several times to reinvent herself. She had created a new YouTube channel in which she had posted a series of tearful and very public apologies, but the comments were merciless. She had tried to return to the world of boxing, but no major promoter would touch her. Her savings, which had once seemed so vast, so inexhaustible, had quickly and very publicly evaporated, without the constant and very lucrative income from her sponsorships. In a desperate and very pathetic interview for a third-rate and very obscure podcast, Victoria had finally, and very publicly, said the words she should have said months and years earlier. "I was completely and utterly wrong," she had said, her own voice now a thin and very reedy whisper. Kesha Campbell wasn't just an exceptional fighter. She was a person I should have respected from the very beginning. My prejudice, my arrogance, it blinded me to her greatness. But the internet, as she was now learning, has a very long and a very unforgiving memory. The clip of her apology had, of course, become a meme again. Victoria Sterling trying to apologize after losing everything. Kesha, when she had heard about the interview, had shown the same and very quiet class that had always and so powerfully set her apart. I don't have any anger towards her, she had said during an interview with Sports Illustrated magazine. Anger consumes the person who carries it. I would rather use my energy to build bridges for other young women like me. Her foundation, the Lightning Dreams Foundation, had already, in just a few short months, helped over 300 young women from disadvantaged and often overlooked communities obtain scholarships and sports opportunities. The foundation's first and very own gym was scheduled to be opened in Kingston, Jamaica, in the very same community where she had first discovered that her fists could be more than just weapons for survival, they could be wings. During the opening ceremony, which was broadcast live all around the world, Kesha had held the microphone in the same and very powerful hands that had so completely and so spectacularly knocked out a world champion. This story, she had said, her own voice echoing through the speakers, is not about revenge, it is about dignity. It is about proving that respect is not earned by privilege, it is earned by character. The audience, a mixture of local and very proud Jamaicans and international and very admiring dignitaries, had erupted in a thunderous and very emotional round of applause. But she wasn't finished. Victoria Sterling, she had said, her own voice now full of a quiet and very profound wisdom, gave me the greatest gift of her life. She underestimated me. And when someone underestimates you, you have a choice. You can let it destroy you, or you can use it as fuel to become unbeatable. Tom Rodriguez, who was watching from the front row, had wiped away a discreet and very proud tear. He had trained champions for decades, but he had never, not once, seen anyone transform a moment of profound and very public humiliation into a lifetime of inspiration with such a quiet and such a profound elegance. Months later, when Lightning Campbell had become the new and very unified world champion, knocking out her opponent in the very same and very spectacular second round in which she had defeated Victoria, the first person she had thanked in her victory speech was not her trainer, not her uncle, not her family. I want to thank, she had said, her own voice now ringing with a new squep and very powerful authority, all of the people who tried to put me down, who tried to humiliate me, who tried to put me in my place. You taught me that true power doesn't come from where we are born or from the color of our skin. It comes from an absolute and an unwavering refusal to accept that other people can and will define our limits. Victoria Sterling had watched that fight on a small and very flickering television in her small and very lonely rented apartment, alone, when the referee had raised Kesha's hand, declaring her the new and very undisputed world champion. Victoria had finally and truly understood the difference between talent and greatness. A person can be born with talent, but greatness, she now knew, is forged. It is forged in the furnace of adversity. Kesha Campbell had not just won a fight. In that small and very unassuming Manhattan gym, she had rewritten the rules. The rules about what it means to be strong. The rules about what it means to deserve respect. And most importantly, the rules about how the best and most profound revenge isn't in destroying your enemy. It's in becoming everything they said you could never be. And while Lightning Campbell now shone in the bright and very warm spotlight of a global and very well-deserved success, proving that some storms don't destroy, they purify and they strengthen, her story had become a lesson that echoed for anyone, anywhere, who has ever been underestimated, who has ever been humiliated, who has ever been diminished. Never, ever, let anyone else define your limits based on their own and very impoverished prejudices. The greatest and most beautiful victory is in proving them completely and utterly and very spectacularly wrong about who you really are.